At my husband's company's big launch event, I had planned to reveal that I was the heir to a billionaire fortune and announce our relationship to the world. But when I walked in, I overheard him telling his coworker, "She's so naive. She has no idea what's really going on." That's when I saw them tangled up on the office bed. "She's so naive. She has no idea what's really going on." Chase's voice drifted through the crack in his office door, stopping me dead in the hallway of Blackwood Industries. I'd come to surprise him before the launch event, wearing the emerald dress he'd bought me for our anniversary, clutching the speech cards where I'd written out my big revelation, that I wasn't just his supportive wife, but the Hawthorne pharmaceutical heir who'd been secretly funding his dreams. Leah Morrison's laugh followed, low and intimate. "How much longer do you plan to keep playing house with her?" Through the narrow opening, I saw them on his leather couch, the one I'd helped him pick out last spring. Her manicured fingers traced patterns on his chest while he played with her hair, both of them fully dressed but positioned in a way that suggested this wasn't their first stolen moment. "Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing stories of betrayal and triumph. If you believe everyone deserves to know the truth in relationships, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more people who need to hear this." My knees went weak. I pressed myself against the wall, grateful for its cold support against my back. The speech cards in my hand crumbled as my fist clenched involuntarily. 6 years. 6 years of pretending to be ordinary, of hiding my inheritance to ensure his love was real, and this was my reward. "Just until after tonight's launch," Chase said, his hand sliding down Leah's back. "Once the funding is secured, I can start the separation process. The prenup I had her sign protects everything I've built." Everything he'd built. With my money. With the anonymous investments I'd funneled through shell companies to save his failing startup 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and again last spring when he'd nearly bankrupted the company through poor management. The irony tasted bitter in my mouth. "What about her family?" Leah asked. "Doesn't she come from money or something?" Chase laughed and the sound made my stomach turn. "Her grandmother left her some jewelry she keeps hidden in the kitchen drawer. Thinks I don't know about it. Probably worth a few thousand. She pretends to be this simple freelance designer, but I've seen the way she looks at expensive things. Classic champagne taste on a beer budget. That's why I had to protect my assets with the prenup. The kitchen drawer where I kept my Cartier watch. My Van Cleef earrings. The Patek Philippe from my father. Items worth more than his entire company's quarterly revenue, hidden among mismatched spoons and expired coupons because I'd wanted him to love me for me, not for the Hawthorne billions that had been sitting untouched since my father died 2 years ago." "You're terrible," Leah said, but her tone suggested she found it charming. "What time should I meet you at the launch?" 7:30. "I'll introduce you to the board as our new head of research development. The position I told Brooke was going to Marcus from the Boston office." My hand found the wall again, needing its stability. Marcus didn't exist. I'd wondered about that name when Chase mentioned him last week, had even offered to help prepare his welcome packet. Chase had brushed me off, saying HR would handle everything. "And your wife won't suspect anything?" "Brooke." He said my name like it was something distasteful. "She'll be too busy playing the supportive wife role. He loves that stuff." Standing beside me, smiling for photos, pretending she understands what we do here. "I bought her that green dress specifically for tonight. She'll wear it because she always does what I expect." The green dress that hung in our closet, the one he'd surprised me with last month, saying it matched my eyes perfectly. I'd been so touched by the gesture, by him remembering our anniversary when he'd been so consumed with work lately. Now I understood it was just another prop in his performance. My phone buzzed in my purse. A text from Nina, my only friend who knew the truth about my inheritance. "Are you really going through with telling him tonight? Please reconsider. Something feels wrong about all this." If only she knew how right her instincts were. I heard movement from inside the office, chairs scraping against the floor. They were standing up. I forced myself to walk, my heels clicking against the marble floor as I headed for the stairwell. No elevator. Too much chance of running into them when the doors opened. 20 minutes earlier, I'd been practicing my speech in the car. "Chase, there's something I need to tell you. I'm not who you think I am. I'm actually Brooke Hawthorne, and I've been supporting your dreams because I believe in you, because I love you." I'd imagined his face, the shock morphing into joy as he realized we could build an empire together. Now those words felt like poison in my throat. The stairwell door closed behind me with a decisive click, and I stood there in the fluorescent lighting, my designer shoes, which I'd told Chase were knockoffs, already pinching my feet. My phone rang. Chase's photo appeared on the screen, the one from our wedding day where he looked at me like I was his entire world. "Hey beautiful," he said when I answered, his voice warm and affectionate. "Just wanted to make sure you're still coming tonight. You're wearing the green dress, right?" "Of course," I heard myself say, my voice surprisingly steady. "Perfect. I have a huge surprise planned for after the announcement. Something that's going to change our lives forever." "I can't wait," I replied, and for once I meant it. Just not in the way he expected. "I should go," he continued. "Still in meetings. These investors are demanding. But after tonight everything will be different. I promise." "Yes," I agreed. "Everything will be different." The call from Harrison Blackstone came 3 days later, while I was pretending to work on a logo design for a fictional client. My laptop screen showed Adobe Illustrator, but my mind kept replaying Chase's words, Leah's laugh, the casual cruelty of their conversation. When Harrison's name appeared on my phone, I almost didn't answer. The Hawthorne estate lawyers only called when something was wrong. "Brooke, we need you here immediately," Harrison said without preamble. His voice carried the weight of 40 years in estate law. "There are documents requiring your signature by end of business today, or we're looking at a 7-figure tax penalty on your father's pharmaceutical patents." I glanced at the clock. 2 in the afternoon. Chase wouldn't be home until midnight as usual, but I'd still need an excuse for being out. "How long will this take?" 2 hours minimum. These are complex transfers involving the European holdings. If we don't file by month's end, the IRS will assume your declining portions of the inheritance. My inheritance. The $3 billion Chase thought was a few pieces of grandmother's jewelry. The pharmaceutical empire he had no idea was funding his dreams through carefully orchestrated anonymous investments. Every time Blackwood Industries nearly folded, a mysterious venture capitalist would appear with exactly the right amount to keep them afloat. Chase never questioned the timing. His ego wouldn't let him consider that someone was protecting him. "I'll be there in 40 minutes, I told Harrison, already fabricating the lie I'd tell Chase if he asked. A rush job from a demanding client. Another logo revision. The mundane fiction of my pretend career. The law offices of Blackstone and Associates occupied 3 floors of a building that screamed old money. Persian rugs that cost more than most people's cars. Original paintings that belonged in museums. Harrison met me in his office, documents already spread across his mahogany desk. Each signature I provided released another portion of my father's empire into my control. Pharmaceutical facilities in Switzerland. Research patents worth billions. Investment portfolios that had been growing since before I was born. "Your father would be proud," Harrison said as I signed my name for the 20th time. "He always said you'd know when to claim your legacy." Would he be proud though? Watching me hide my wealth from my husband like some shameful secret? Pretending to be ordinary while Chase built his ego on the foundation of my hidden support? I was walking through Blackwood Industries lobby 2 hours later, having decided to surprise Chase with coffee from his favorite shop, when I collided with Leah Morrison. Not accidentally. She'd clearly been waiting, positioned perfectly to intercept anyone heading toward the elevators. "Brooke." She said my name like we were old friends, though I knew we'd never been formally introduced. Her hand caught my arm, fingers pressing just hard enough to stop me from pulling away. "How wonderful to run into you." Up close she was everything I wasn't. Tall where I was average. Blonde where I was brunette. Confident in the way of women who'd never doubted their place in the world. Her perfume hit me immediately, something expensive and distinctive. Tom Ford maybe. Black orchid. The same scent that had been clinging to Chase's jacket last week when he'd claimed he'd been in back-to-back meetings. "I don't believe we've met," I said, though of course I knew exactly who she was. Dr. Leah Morrison, head of research development. The woman whose fingers had been tracing patterns on my husband's chest 3 days ago. "Oh, but I feel like I know you," she said, her smile showing too many teeth. "Chase talks about you constantly. How devoted you are. How supportive." She paused, her eyes scanning my outfit. The deliberately modest dress from Target. The knockoff designer bag I carried to maintain my cover. It must be so hard having a husband who works such long hours. The sympathy in her voice was so fake it could have been manufactured in a laboratory. She squeezed my arm again and I caught another wave of that perfume. Definitely black orchid. Definitely the same scent that had been on Chase's clothes. He's dedicated to his work, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Oh yes, very dedicated. Something flickered in her eyes. Amusement maybe. Or triumph. We were just in a meeting until 3 this morning. Strategic planning for the launch. Your husband has such stamina. The coffee in my hand felt suddenly heavy. 3 in the morning. He texted me at 11 saying he was heading home soon. Another lie to add to the collection I was building. I should go, I said, stepping toward the elevator. Of course. She released my arm but leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper. That's a lovely dress, by the way. Target has such nice things these days. She walked away before I could respond, her heels clicking against the marble with the confidence of someone who'd already won a game I hadn't known we were playing. I stood there holding the coffee that was growing cold, wondering how she knew where I shopped. Had Chase told her? Laughed about his wife's bargain hunting while they conducted their strategic planning sessions? The surprise got worse that evening. Chase's mother Eleanor arrived unannounced at 7, using the spare key we'd foolishly given her for emergencies. I was setting the table with my grandmother's Bernardin china, the set worth $30,000 that I'd told Chase I'd found at an estate sale for $200. Brooke, darling, Eleanor said, though her tone suggested I was anything but. She air-kissed my cheek while her eyes catalogued everything wrong with our penthouse. I was in the neighborhood. She lived in Connecticut. Nothing about Manhattan was her neighborhood. Chase isn't home yet, I said, though she already knew that. She never visited when her son was around to buffer her criticisms. Perfect. We can have girl talk. She settled into our living room like a queen granting an audience. This place is looking rather tired, isn't it? Perhaps after the launch, you can afford to redecorate. The penthouse was immaculate. I'd spent a fortune making it appear middle-class comfortable while hiding anything that might reveal my wealth. But to Eleanor, who knew nothing of my inheritance, we were simply not good enough. We're comfortable, I said, pouring her wine from a bottle I'd claimed was from Trader Joe's but had actually cost $300. Comfortable. She said the word like it tasted bad. Well, I suppose that's something. Though at your age I'd already given Charles 3 children. Chase isn't getting younger, you know. The children conversation. We had it every time she visited. What she didn't know was that Chase had been postponing that discussion for 2 years, always claiming we needed to be more financially stable first. Now I wondered if he'd been waiting until he could leave me for Leah. Speaking of suitable marriages, Eleanor continued, swirling her wine, I ran into Leah Morrison at the club yesterday. Such good breeding. Her father's in pharmaceuticals, you know. Old money. The kind of background that would complement Chase's ambitions perfectly. The wine glass trembled in my hand. She seems nice. Nice. Eleanor laughed. Darling, she's exceptional. Harvard Medical School. Published researcher. The kind of woman who understands Chase's work. Her eyes fixed on me with surgical precision. Not that you don't try, dear. But some things require a certain level of sophistication. I served dinner on my grandmother's china while Eleanor continued her monologue about Leah Morrison's virtues. Each piece I set down was worth more than Eleanor's monthly mortgage, but she saw only what I wanted her to see. Mismatched Target plates. A middle-class wife playing dress-up in a world she didn't belong in. After she left, I was cleaning the kitchen when I found it. Chase's gym bag, forgotten in the corner behind the recycling. Inside, beneath his workout clothes, was a receipt that made my heart stop. The Ritz-Carlton, Boston. 2 nights. A king suite. The dates matched the weekend he'd claimed to be pulling all-nighters at the lab. Room service charges for breakfast for 2. Champagne delivered at midnight. When Chase finally came home at 11:30, I was still holding the receipt. How was Boston? I asked. He didn't even pause while hanging up his coat. What do you mean? I haven't been to Boston in months. I stood there holding the receipt while Chase hung up his coat, his lie about Boston hanging in the air between us like a physical presence. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They'd gone past that into a strange numbness that spread up my arms and into my chest. He walked past me toward the bedroom, loosening his tie, completely unaware that I held evidence of his deception in my hands. The next morning, I called in sick to my fictional freelance projects and did something I'd never done before. I followed my husband. He left at 8:30, normal time, normal routine. Kissed my cheek with lips that had probably kissed Leah in that Boston hotel room. Told me not to wait up because Tuesday meetings always ran late. Tuesday. I made a mental note. At noon, I positioned myself at a coffee shop across from Chez Laurent, the French restaurant where Chase claimed he could never get reservations. Through the window, I watched him arrive first, checking his watch, smoothing his hair. He'd changed shirts since this morning. The blue one I'd bought him for Christmas replaced with the gray one Leah had complimented at last month's company dinner. She arrived 10 minutes later, and the way his face lit up made my chest constrict. He stood to greet her, his hand lingering on her lower back as he guided her to their table. A corner booth, intimate and partially hidden from view. The waiter brought champagne without being asked. This was clearly their regular spot, their regular Tuesday routine. Her hand reached across the table, fingers intertwining with his while they looked at menus they probably knew by heart. She threw her head back laughing at something he said, and he watched her with an expression I recognized. The same way he used to look at me when we were dating, when I was still mysterious and exciting, before I became furniture in his carefully constructed life. When they left at 2:30, Chase helped her into her coat with such tenderness that I had to look away. His hands lingered on her shoulders, adjusting the collar, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The same gestures he'd once reserved for me, now performed on a sidewalk in broad daylight where anyone could see. Where his wife could see. I drove to Nina's apartment instead of going home. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside, already reaching for the wine. We sat on her couch, the same one where she'd helped me practice my revelation speech just 2 weeks ago, back when I thought my biggest problem was timing the announcement perfectly. "I have to tell you something," Nina said suddenly, her hands twisting in her lap. "I've been trying to figure out how to say this for weeks." The wine in my glass sloshed dangerously as I set it down. "What?" 3 weeks ago, I was downtown looking for a birthday gift for my mom. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I passed Cartier and through the window I saw Chase. He was with a blonde woman. She was trying on rings, Brooke. Engagement rings. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the couch cushion to steady myself. "Leah. You know her. She works at Blackwood. Head of Research Development." The words came out mechanical, like I was reading from a company directory. Harvard Medical School. Old money. Good breeding, according to Chase's mother. Nina grabbed my hands, her own trembling. He was buying her a ring, Brooke. The sales associate was bringing out different settings. She was posing with each one, taking selfies. They looked so happy. I wanted to storm in there to scream at him, but I froze. "I've been carrying this guilt for 3 weeks. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner." An engagement ring. While he was still married to me. While he was still coming home to our bed, eating dinners I cooked, playing the devoted husband at company functions. The audacity of it stole my breath. "When did you say this was?" I asked, my mind racing through dates. 3 Tuesdays ago. Around 2 in the afternoon. Tuesday. Their regular day. Lunch at Chez Laurent followed by ring shopping. How romantic. How perfectly planned. I wondered if he'd already proposed, if she was wearing the ring somewhere I couldn't see it, or if he was waiting until after the launch. After he'd secured his funding and could dispose of me without risking his company. That night I waited until Chase was deeply asleep, his breathing even and heavy. His phone was charging on his nightstand, but I didn't need it. I had something better. Access to our joint accounts, the ones he didn't know I monitored through my own banking app. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, the screen brightness turned down low, and started digging. There they were, small transfers every week. 500 here, 700 there, always to the same account number I didn't recognize. The transfers had been happening for over a year, labeled as investment planning or portfolio diversification. $50,000 systematically moved out of our joint savings. But I knew those patterns. I'd managed hundreds of millions in Hawthorne funds, had seen every type of financial maneuvering possible. This wasn't investment planning. This was an exit strategy. He was building a nest egg, probably in an account under only his name, preparing for the divorce he thought was coming after the launch. The irony almost made me laugh. He was stealing what he thought was his own money, not knowing that every penny in our accounts had come from my inheritance, carefully laundered through fake freelance projects and imaginary clients. He was embezzling from the Hawthorne empire without even knowing it existed. At 3 in the morning a phone buzzed. Not his regular phone but a sound coming from his jacket pocket. A second phone like some character in a bad spy movie. He slipped out of bed, grabbing the jacket and shut himself in the bathroom. But our apartment had thin walls and I'd learned years ago that if you pressed your ear against the heating vent, you could hear everything. The timeline is tight, he whispered. The launch is Thursday. I need 2 more days to get everything in position. A pause while someone responded. No, she suspects nothing. Brooke's too trusting. She actually bought the story about Marcus from the Boston office. Soft laugh. I know. She even offered to help with his welcome packet. Sometimes I almost feel guilty about how easy this is. Another pause. The divorce papers are already drawn up. My lawyer says with the prenup, she'll get nothing except what she brought into the marriage. Which is basically some old jewelry and whatever she's saved from her little design projects. My little design projects that had funneled $3 million into Blackwood Industries over the past 6 years. After the launch, after the investors sign off, I'll tell her. Friday morning. I want to do it in person, at least give her that much respect. Respect. The word made bile rise in my throat. I love you too, he whispered, and my heart finally completely shattered. Just 2 more days and we can stop hiding. The bathroom door opened. I forced my breathing to remain deep, and even as he slipped back into bed. He lay beside me, this stranger wearing my husband's face, and within minutes was asleep again. But I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, planning my own timeline. Thursday's launch was 36 hours away. Chase thought he had 2 more days of pretending. He was wrong. The 36 hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. I moved through Wednesday like an actress who'd forgotten her lines but kept performing anyway. Chase left that morning with his usual peck on my cheek, reminding me about the launch event, making sure I'd wear the green dress. I smiled and nodded, playing the devoted wife one final time while my insides churned with the knowledge of what was coming. Thursday arrived heavy with humidity that made the air feel thick and suffocating. I spent the afternoon at Harrison Blackstone's office, signing documents that would freeze certain anonymous investments, particularly the ones flowing into Blackwood Industries. Harrison didn't question my sudden decisions. He'd been my father's lawyer for 30 years and understood that sometimes timing was everything in both business and personal matters. By 6 o'clock I stood in front of our bedroom mirror, zipping up the emerald dress Chase had chosen for me. The fabric felt like armor against my skin. My hands were steady as I applied lipstick, a darker shade than I usually wore. In my purse, the speech cards I'd written weeks ago sat next to new ones I'd drafted that morning. 2 versions of the same revelation but with vastly different endings. The drive to Blackwood Industries took 20 minutes through Manhattan traffic. I used the time to breathe, to center myself, to transform from the woman who'd spent 6 years hiding her true self into someone who was about to reveal everything. The building's glass facade reflected the setting sun, turning everything golden and somehow ominous. I parked in the visitor section, not in my usual spot beside Chase's BMW. Tonight I wasn't really his wife. I was something else entirely. The elevator to the 40th floor had never felt longer. Each floor that passed felt like shedding another layer of the persona I'd worn for so long. The freelance designer. The supportive wife. The naive woman who didn't understand her husband's business. By the time the doors opened, I felt raw and exposed and powerful in a way I'd never experienced before. The executive floor buzzed with pre-event energy. Caterers arranged elaborate displays while bartenders polished glasses that would soon hold champagne worth more per bottle than most people's car payments. But I wasn't heading to the ballroom yet. I had one more thing to confirm, one more piece of evidence to collect before I could move forward with what I was planning. Chase's office door was slightly open, golden light spilling into the hallway. I approached quietly, my heels silent on the thick carpeting. Through the crack I heard his voice, casual and dismissive in a tone I now recognized all too well. "She'll be here soon," he was saying. Playing the perfect wife in that green dress I bought her. God, she was so grateful for that thing. You'd think I'd given her diamonds instead of something off the rack from Nordstrom. Leah's laugh was like nails on glass. "She really has no idea about us?" Brooke's sweet, but observation isn't her strong suit. She still thinks I'm working late when I'm with you. Still believes that conference in Boston was real. I could probably move you into our apartment and she'd think you were the new housekeeper. They were sitting on the leather couch, the same one from the other day. Leah's shoes were off, her feet tucked under her while she leaned against Chase's shoulder. On her left hand, catching the light from his desk lamp, was a ring. The engagement ring Nina had seen him buying. He was already wearing it, just on the wrong hand for now. After tomorrow's divorce conversation, we won't have to hide anymore, Chase continued, his fingers playing with her hair. I've got everything lined up. The prenup protects all my assets. She'll get what she came in with, which is basically nothing. Some jewelry from her grandmother that she thinks I don't know about. Maybe $50,000 if she's been saving from her design work. And the company? Leah asked. Once tonight's launch succeeds and the investors sign off, Blackwood will be valued at over $100 million. None of which she can touch thanks to that prenup. She was so eager to prove she wasn't after my money that she signed it without even having a lawyer look at it. The irony of that statement nearly made me laugh out loud. The prenup protected his assets, yes. But it also protected mine. Every anonymous investment, every shell company transfer, every penny of the Hawthorne fortune remained solely in my control. He'd been so focused on protecting himself from a gold digger that he'd never considered he might be the one digging. I backed away from the door and walked to the executive bathroom. The one with marble counters and individual stalls that locked properly. I stood at the sink, meeting my own eyes in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who'd practiced speeches about love and partnership. This woman had sharper edges, clearer vision, and a plan that was about to unfold. I called Harrison from the bathroom, keeping my voice low but firm. Execute the transfers we discussed. All of them. Immediately. Are you certain? Once I do this, it can't be reversed. I'm certain. Next, I called the security firm I'd contacted earlier that week. Mercury Security? This is Brooke Hawthorne. I need your team at Blackwood Industries within the hour. Discreet positioning but visible when I give the signal. Understood, Ms. Hawthorne. We'll have 6 operatives in place. I touched up my lipstick, adjusted the emerald dress one final time and walked toward the ballroom. The transformation was complete. I wasn't walking in as Chase's naive wife. I was walking in as Brooke Hawthorne, heir to a pharmaceutical empire, about to reclaim my power in the most public way possible. The ballroom doors were open, revealing a sea of Silicon Valley elite mixed with New York old money. Investors, board members, journalists, and influencers, all here to celebrate Blackwood's triumph. They turned as I entered, many recognizing me as Chase's wife, offering warm smiles and congratulations. Board member Richard Klein approached immediately, his wife Margaret beside him. "Brooke, you must be so proud," Richard said, clasping my hand. "Chase has built something remarkable." "Yes," I agreed, my smile perfectly calibrated. "Tonight's certainly going to be remarkable." Margaret leaned in conspiratorially. "He's lucky to have such a supportive partner. Behind every successful man, right?" "Sometimes," I replied, accepting a champagne flute from a passing waiter. "The woman isn't behind him at all. Sometimes she's been in front the whole time and he just didn't notice." They laughed, taking it as a joke. If only they knew how literal I was being. I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and praise for Chase's success, each compliment adding fuel to the fire burning in my chest. Several people mentioned how fortunate Chase was to have me, how my support must have meant everything during the difficult early years. "More than you know," I told each of them, smiling wider with every passing minute. The champagne flute felt weightless in my hand as I watched the crowd shift and swirl around the ballroom like schools of expensive fish. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glittered below us, unaware that 40 floors up, a marriage and a company were about to implode in front of 300 witnesses. The lights dimmed slightly and Chase appeared at the podium, his confidence radiating across the room. He looked every inch the successful CEO in his tailored Tom Ford suit, the one I'd bought him last year with Hawthorne money he didn't know existed. Behind him, a massive screen displayed the Blackwood Industries logo, sleek and modern, built on lies and anonymous investments from a wife he thought was nobody special. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chase began, his voice carrying that practiced warmth he deployed at investor meetings. "Tonight marks the culmination of 6 years of innovation, dedication, and breakthrough science. Blackwood Industries stands ready to revolutionize genetic therapy, and we couldn't have done it without each and every one of you. The crowd applauded politely. I noticed Leah positioning herself near the stage, close enough to be seen but not so close as to appear presumptuous. She'd changed since this afternoon, now wearing a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than she supposedly earned in a month. The engagement ring was gone from her right hand, likely hidden in her purse until the appropriate moment. Chase continued his speech, outlining projections and market opportunities, using words like synergy and paradigm shift that made investors reach for their checkbooks. He was good at this, I had to admit. The performance, the commanding presence, the ability to make people believe in his vision. He just hadn't realized his entire vision had been funded by the woman he'd called naive 4 hours ago. Before we continue with the technical presentation, Chase said, his smile broadening, I want to take a moment to thank someone very special. My wife, Brooke, who has been my rock throughout this journey. Sweetheart, would you come up here? The crowd turned to me, applauding warmly. This wasn't part of the script, at least not the one I'd prepared for. But Chase loved his gestures, his public displays that made him look like the devoted husband. I set down my champagne and walked toward the stage, my heels clicking against the marble floor with metronomic precision. Each step felt like walking toward my own execution and my resurrection simultaneously. Chase extended his hand to help me up the 3 steps to the stage. His palm was dry and warm, the hand of someone utterly confident in his control of the situation. He pulled me close, kissing my cheek for the cameras that were already flashing. Isn't she wonderful? He said into the microphone, his arm around my waist possessively. 6 years of supporting my dream, never complaining about the late nights or the endless meetings. I couldn't have done this without her. The irony of that statement nearly made me laugh. He literally couldn't have done it without me, just not in the way he was implying. The crowd applauded again, and I saw several board members' wives dabbing at their eyes, moved by this display of marital devotion. Actually, I said, my voice carrying across the room before Chase could continue, I have something I'd like to share as well. Chase's arm tightened around my waist, but his smile never wavered. Of course, darling, he said, though I caught the flash of annoyance in his eyes. This wasn't planned. I wasn't supposed to speak. I gently extracted myself from his grip and took the microphone. The weight of it felt right in my hands, like a weapon I'd been waiting to wield. The room fell silent, hundreds of faces turned up toward the stage, expectant and curious. Thank you all for being here tonight, I began, my voice steadier than my heartbeat. This is indeed a momentous occasion, and I'm honored to be part of it. Chase is right that I've been supporting his dream for 6 years. What he doesn't know is exactly how much support I've been providing. A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. Chase's hand touched my elbow, a warning disguised as affection. You see, I continued, stepping away from his reach, Chase has had an anonymous investor these past 6 years. Someone who believed in his vision enough to invest millions when banks wouldn't lend him a penny. Someone who saved Blackwood from bankruptcy not once, not twice, but 3 times. The confusion in the room shifted to interest. Phones appeared in hands, sensing something newsworthy was happening. Chase's face had gone very still, the kind of stillness that precedes either flight or fight. That investor, I said, looking directly at Chase now, was me. Brooke Hawthorne, sole heir to Hawthorne Pharmaceuticals, and the woman you called naive this afternoon while you were wrapped around Leah Morrison on your office couch. The gasp that went through the room was almost physical, like all 300 people had inhaled simultaneously. Chase's mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish suddenly removed from water. His hand shot out to grab the microphone, but I stepped back, keeping it out of his reach. That's ridiculous, he managed to say, his voice carrying even without amplification. Brooke, what are you doing? I pulled out my phone, connecting it to the presentation system with the click of a button. Harrison Blackstone had arranged this technical capability yesterday, ensuring I could display whatever I needed on the massive screen behind us. The first document appeared. Bank records showing transfers from Hawthorne Holdings to Blackwood Industries, dated and documented, millions of dollars flowing from my inheritance into Chase's company. Every major funding round, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word, every emergency injection of capital, every bridge loan that kept this company alive came from Hawthorne money. My money. The money Chase didn't know I had because I wanted to be sure he loved me for myself, not my inheritance. The screen changed to show a photo Harrison had provided. My father and me at a Hawthorne board meeting 5 years ago, clearly identifying me as his daughter and heir. Then another document. The shell company paperwork showing how the investments had been structured to remain anonymous. Leah had started moving toward the exit, but the Mercury security personnel were already in position, their presence subtle but effective. She stopped, trapped between the crowd and the security team, her face pale under the ballroom lights. But that's not even the best part, I continued, feeling the power of the moment coursing through me. This afternoon, while preparing for tonight's event, I discovered some interesting financial irregularities. It seems someone has been moving money out of Blackwood's operational accounts into personal holdings. Someone has been billing personal expenses as company costs. Someone has been committing what I believe the FBI would call embezzlement and fraud. The screen filled with the evidence I'd gathered over the past 3 days. The doctored invoices, the suspicious transfers, the Boston hotel bill charged to the company as a conference expense, when no conference existed. Chase's face had gone from pale to gray, his hands gripping the podium like it might keep him from drowning. Security, someone called out from the crowd. Someone call security. But the security team was mine, and they weren't moving except to keep the exits controlled. The crowd had become a living thing, phones raised, recording everything, the silence replaced by urgent whispers and the rapid-fire clicking of photos being taken. I've already forwarded this information to the appropriate authorities, I announced, looking directly at the crowd of investors and board members. I imagine they'll have questions about where their money actually went. The elevator descended in silence while behind me, the ballroom erupted into chaos. Through the closing doors, I caught a glimpse of board members surrounding Chase, their faces twisted with rage, while reporters pushed forward with microphones and cameras. The Mercury security team held their positions, ensuring order but not protecting Chase from the consequences that were finally catching up to him. My phone started vibrating before I even reached the parking garage. Chase's name flashed on the screen, call after call that I let go to voicemail. Then came the texts, rapid fire and increasingly desperate. What have you done? We need to talk. This is insane. You don't understand what you've just destroyed. Answer your phone now. I turned the device to silent and slipped it into my purse as I walked to my car. The valet, a young man who'd always been kind to me, handed over my keys with wide eyes. He'd clearly heard what had happened upstairs. News traveled fast in buildings like this, especially when it involved public humiliation and federal crimes. The drive to our penthouse took 15 minutes through unusually light traffic. I used the time to call Harrison Blackstone, who answered on the first ring despite it being nearly 10 at night. I watched the live stream, he said without preamble. Several reporters were broadcasting. You handled that remarkably well. I need the divorce papers filed first thing tomorrow morning, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. And I need you to freeze all joint assets immediately. Already in motion. I took the liberty of preparing everything after our meeting yesterday. The prenuptial agreement Chase insisted on is actually quite favorable to you, since it protects all premarital assets and inheritances. He essentially locked himself out of the Hawthorne fortune without realizing it existed. The irony of that wasn't lost on me. Chase had been so concerned about protecting his future earnings from a gold-digging wife that he'd signed away any claim to my billions. His lawyer had probably congratulated him on his foresight. I reached the penthouse and found the locks already changed. Building management moved fast when Harrison Blackstone called. My new keys worked perfectly, and I entered what had been our home but now felt like a crime scene I needed to process and evacuate. My phone continued its relentless buzzing. The messages from Chase had evolved from anger to bargaining. We can work this out. Think about what you're throwing away. 6 years, Brooke. Doesn't that mean anything? I made mistakes but we can fix this. Please just talk to me. I moved through the apartment methodically, taking only what had been mine before Chase entered my life. My grandmother's Bernardin china, carefully wrapped in tissue paper. The photo albums from my childhood that I'd hidden in the closet. The jewelry I'd kept concealed in the kitchen drawer, including the Cartier watch and Van Cleef pieces that were worth more than Chase's car. Everything else. The furniture we'd chosen together, the art we'd bought on our honeymoon, the expensive gifts he'd given me over the years, I left behind. They were props from a performance I was no longer participating in. Nina arrived at midnight with boxes and fierce loyalty. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug that nearly broke my composure. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "What you did tonight was incredible." "I feel numb," I admitted, continuing to pack while she helped. "I thought I'd feel vindicated or angry or something, but I just feel empty." "That's shock," she said, wrapping another piece of china. "The emotions will come later. Right now we just need to get you out of here." Chase's messages had shifted again, this time toward threats. "You've destroyed everything I've worked for. The FBI is seizing our accounts because of your stunt. My lawyers will bury you. You think you've won, but this isn't over. No one humiliates me like this." I showed them to Nina, who immediately forwarded them to Harrison. Evidence of harassment would be useful if Chase decided to escalate beyond angry texts. Though given that federal investigators were probably already preparing charges against him, he had bigger problems than our divorce. By 2 a.m, we had my belongings loaded into Nina's SUV and a small moving truck. The penthouse looked strange with my presence erased from it, like a stage set after the play has ended. I left my keys on the granite counter along with the wedding ring I'd removed in the elevator. No note. No explanation. The empty space where I'd existed would say everything necessary. The drive to the Hamptons took 2 hours through empty highways. I'd inherited the estate when my father died, but I'd never lived there, keeping it maintained through a management company while I played at being middle class in Manhattan. As we pulled through the gates, motion sensors triggered subtle lighting that illuminated a house I'd only visited 3 times since the funeral. 20 rooms of pristine loneliness spread before us. The foyer alone was larger than most apartments, with a chandelier that had supposedly belonged to some railroad baron in the 1890s. Nina whistled softly as we carried boxes through rooms that echoed with our footsteps. "This is insane," she said, setting down a box in what would be my bedroom. "You own this whole place and you've been living in that penthouse pretending to be ordinary?" "I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I had," I said, the words sounding hollow now. "Look how well that worked out. We found champagne in the wine cellar, vintage bottles worth thousands, and drank it from paper cups we'd brought from a gas station. The contrast seemed appropriate somehow, sitting in a mansion worth $40 million, drinking champagne from convenience store cups while my marriage imploded across every media platform in the country." Harrison called at 4 a.m. "Federal agents raided Blackwood Industries an hour ago. They're seizing all computers and financial records. Chase has been taken in for questioning. Leah Morrison as well." "Already?" I sat up straighter in my father's leather desk chair, the one he'd imported from England decades ago. "Your documentation was very thorough. Combined with what they're finding in the computers, they have enough for arrest warrants by morning. Also, 3 major investors have already filed civil suits against Chase personally. The prenup won't protect him from those." After Harrison hung up, I turned on the television in my father's study. Every business channel was running the story. Someone had edited together clips from the live-streamed confrontation, my voice clear and damning as I revealed both my identity and Chase's betrayal. The ticker at the bottom read, "Hawthorne heiress exposes husband's fraud at company launch." One analyst was already speculating about what this meant for Blackwood Industries. Without the Hawthorne funding, which apparently accounted for 70% of their capital, the company is essentially worthless. Add in the fraud allegations and the FBI investigation, and we're looking at complete collapse by market open. Nina found me there as sunrise painted the ocean visible through the study windows. She brought coffee in actual mugs this time, and we sat together watching my old life dissected by strangers on television. "How do you feel?" she asked carefully. I considered the question. In 12 hours, I'd gone from being Chase's naive wife to exposing myself as a billionaire heiress who'd taken down her husband's company on live television. My phone showed hundreds of messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Reporters probably, or people who suddenly remembered we'd been friends in college. "Free," I said finally and meant it. The word "free" had barely left my lips when Nina's phone buzzed with a news alert. She held it up, showing a video of Chase being led from Blackwood Industries in handcuffs, federal agents flanking him on both sides. His face, captured in harsh morning light, looked hollow and defeated, nothing like the confident man who'd stood at a podium 12 hours earlier promising to revolutionize genetic therapy. The footage played on loop across every business channel. Chase stumbling slightly on the curb, an agent steadying him with a grip on his elbow. The careful way they guided his head as he entered the federal vehicle, protecting him from hitting the door frame even as they arrested him for crimes that could mean a decade in prison. Behind him, another team escorted Leah Morrison, her perfect composure finally shattered, mascara streaking down her cheeks as photographers captured every moment of her downfall. Harrison called within minutes of the footage airing. The FBI has expanded their investigation. They found evidence of additional fraud going back 3 years. Apparently, Ms. Morrison was selling proprietary research to competitors while billing Blackwood for consulting fees that never happened. She's looking at conspiracy charges, corporate espionage, and wire fraud. I moved to the window of my father's study, looking out at the Atlantic Ocean stretching endlessly before me. The Hamptons estate had views that could make you forget the rest of the world existed, but I couldn't escape the reality of what was happening 40 miles away in Manhattan. My phone showed 73 missed calls from Chase, 20 from numbers I didn't recognize and 1 from Eleanor, Chase's mother. That one I almost answered, then thought better of it. She could wait. The bankruptcy proceedings moved with stunning speed. By the following Tuesday, less than a week after the launch event, Blackwood Industries had filed for Chapter 7 liquidation. The investors who'd threatened civil suits had frozen what few assets remained, and without the Hawthorne funding that had kept it afloat, the company collapsed like a house built on sand. Harrison arranged for Hawthorne Pharmaceuticals to bid on the patents and research assets. A formality really, since no other company wanted to touch anything associated with the scandal. "We're offering $10 million for the entire patent portfolio," Harrison informed me during a meeting in the estate's formal dining room, papers spread across a table that could seat 20. "The research is actually quite valuable, properly managed. The scientists did good work despite the leadership failures. Make sure the research team knows they'll have jobs if they want them," I said, signing the acquisition papers. "They didn't create this mess. They shouldn't suffer for Chase's crimes." The auction itself took place in a sterile conference room in Lower Manhattan. I didn't attend, but Harrison's associate sent updates. Chase's executive team watched their life's work get carved up and sold for pennies on the dollar. The legitimate assets went to Hawthorne. The office furniture and equipment went to liquidators. The executive floor's expensive furnishings, including Chase's precious awards and diplomas, sold for less than $1,000 total. Eleanor finally reached me on day 8. After I'd ignored 6 voicemails that progressed from demanding to desperate. She showed up at the estate's gates unannounced, forcing me to decide whether to let her in or leave her standing there like a door-to-door salesperson. Against my better judgment, I had security escort her to the front entrance. The woman who walked into my father's study bore little resemblance to the Eleanor who'd criticized my housekeeping and questioned my worthiness as her son's wife. Her usually perfect hair hung limp. Her designer clothes looked slept in, and her eyes held the kind of desperation I recognized from people who'd lost everything they thought mattered. "Please," she said before I could speak, sinking into the chair across from my desk without being invited. "You have to help him. You have to tell them this is all a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding, Eleanor. Your son embezzled funds, committed fraud, and destroyed the lives of hundreds of employees who trusted him. He made mistakes," she said, tears flowing freely now, destroying makeup that had probably taken an hour to apply. "But he doesn't deserve to lose everything. He's my only child, Brooke. Surely you can understand a mother's love." I thought about all the dinners where she'd compared me unfavorably to Leah Morrison. The constant suggestions that Chase had married beneath himself. The subtle and not-so-subtle insults about my supposed middle-class background. But looking at her now, broken and begging, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not forgiveness, certainly not that, but a kind of weary pity. "I can't help Chase," I said firmly. "He created this situation through his own choices. But I can ensure your personal trust fund remains protected from the civil suits. The one your late husband established. It's modest, but it will keep you comfortable." She sobbed harder, whether from relief or continued desperation I couldn't tell. After she left, Nina found me standing at the window again, watching the sun set over the ocean. "That was more generous than she deserved," Nina observed. "She's a bitter, selfish woman who raised a son in her image," I replied. "But she doesn't deserve to be homeless because Chase turned out exactly like she taught him to be." The final satisfaction came 2 weeks later when I personally supervised the renovation of Blackwood's executive floor. As the new owner through Hawthorne Pharmaceuticals, I had complete control over the space. Most of it would be converted into research laboratories, giving the scientists the resources they'd always needed but never received under Chase's leadership. But his office, that corner suite where I'd heard him call me naive, where I'd seen him with Leah, that space deserved special treatment. I stood in the doorway as workers dismantled everything that had made it his sanctuary. The massive oak desk where he'd planned his escape strategy. The wall of awards and accolades that had fed his ego. The leather couch where he'd betrayed our marriage in every possible way. What do you want done with this? The foreman held up a framed photo that had sat on Chase's desk. Our wedding photo, the one where we both looked deliriously happy before the lies and secrets and betrayals. Trash, I said without hesitation. All of it goes in the dumpster. I watched from the window as workers threw the couch over the edge into the industrial bin below. It landed with a satisfying crash, leather splitting, frames splintering. 6 years of marriage reduced to garbage in a metal container, waiting to be hauled away and forgotten. The office would become a supply closet. Shelves of printer paper and toner cartridges where Chase's ego had once lived. Janitors would store mops and buckets where he'd stored his secrets and lies. Every time someone needed office supplies, they'd walk through the space where Chase Blackwood thought he was building an empire, never knowing they were standing in the ruins of a man who'd mistaken cruelty for strength and deception for intelligence. As I signed the final renovation orders, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, assuming it was another reporter, but something made me read it. Ms. Hawthorne, this is Dr. Patricia Kim from the research team. Thank you for saving our jobs and our work. We won't let you down. The research team didn't know it yet, but under Hawthorne's leadership, they would complete the genetic therapy breakthrough Chase had promised but never delivered. Their work would save lives, make headlines for the right reasons, and prove that good science could survive bad leadership. Chase would watch from federal prison as his former employees achieved everything he'd pretended to be building. The message from Dr. Patricia Kim stayed with me through the months that followed. A small reminder that something good could emerge from the wreckage. 6 months passed in a blur of legal proceedings, corporate restructuring, and learning to inhabit the life I'd hidden for so long. The Hamptons estate no longer felt like a museum I was visiting but had become home, its 20 rooms gradually filling with actual life instead of echoing emptiness. The invitation to speak at the Global Pharmaceutical Innovation Summit arrived on a Tuesday morning, hand-delivered by courier to ensure I couldn't pretend I hadn't received it. They wanted me to deliver the keynote address, to stand before an audience of industry leaders and explain Hawthorne's new direction. The same podium where Chase had planned to announce Blackwood's breakthrough would now be mine. I stood before the mirror in my bedroom that morning, but this time I wasn't hiding anything. The Cartier watch gleamed on my wrist. The designer suit I wore cost more than most people's monthly salary, and I no longer pretended otherwise. My reflection showed someone I was still learning to recognize. Confident without arrogance, powerful without cruelty, authentic in a way I'd never been allowed to be before. The conference center hummed with familiar energy when I arrived. Many of the same faces from that night 6 months ago filled the audience, though their expressions had changed. Where once they'd shown polite interest in Chase's promises, now they watched me with genuine curiosity and perhaps a touch of wariness. Everyone knew the story of the naive wife who'd turned out to be a billionaire, who'd brought down her husband's empire while building something better from its ashes. Good morning, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the room without the tremor that had once accompanied public speaking. 6 months ago, many of you witnessed what happens when ambition operates without ethics, when success is built on deception rather than genuine innovation. Today, I'm here to show you what we've built instead. The presentation outlined Hawthorne's transformation. Not just the acquisition of Blackwood's research, but a complete restructuring of how pharmaceutical development could work. Profit sharing for every employee from janitors to lead scientists. Anonymous ethics reporting that actually resulted in action. Open source sharing of certain research to advance the field rather than just our bottom line. We've proven that ethical business isn't just morally correct, I continued, clicking through slides showing our latest breakthrough. The gene therapy Chase had promised but never delivered, now actually working in clinical trials. It's also more profitable. Our researchers are more innovative when they're not afraid. Our partnerships are stronger when built on transparency. Our innovations are more meaningful when they're designed to help people rather than just generate revenue. Nina stood at the side of the stage, now my chief operating officer, wearing a suit that probably cost more than she'd made in a year at her old job. She'd earned every penny of her new salary, helping me transform Hawthorne from my father's traditional pharmaceutical company into something revolutionary. When I introduced her, the applause was genuine. Everyone in the industry knew her story. The loyal friend who'd stood by me when everyone else would have run, who'd helped pack my grandmother's china while my world collapsed, who'd drunk champagne from paper cups in a $40 million mansion while we figured out how to rebuild. The questions afterward were probing but respectful. How had I hidden my identity for so long? What made me finally reveal the truth? Did I regret the way it had happened? I answered honestly, admitting that living a double life had been exhausting, that love had made me do foolish things, that sometimes the truth needs a dramatic reveal to be believed. 3 hours later, I was walking toward my car when I saw him. Chase stood outside the federal courthouse 2 blocks away, his lawyer beside him, both in dark suits that couldn't hide the defeat in their postures. The sentencing had been that morning. I'd known but chosen not to attend. Seeing him now was like spotting a ghost of someone who'd once mattered but had become irrelevant. He saw me at the same moment and froze. 5 years of minimum security had just been handed down, the judge apparently unmoved by his lawyer's arguments about first-time offenses and previous good character. He'd serve at least 3 before possibility of parole. His lawyer tried to guide him away, but Chase pulled free and walked toward me with the determined stride of someone with nothing left to lose. "Brooke," he said when he was close enough that I could see the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his hair that hadn't been there 6 months ago. I waited, saying nothing, giving him no encouragement or acknowledgement beyond meeting his gaze. "I just wanted to say," he paused, seeming to search for words that might matter. "You destroyed everything." "No," I replied calmly. "I revealed everything. There's a significant difference. You planned it all along. Hiding who you were, waiting for the perfect moment to humiliate me." I almost laughed at his narcissism, still intact despite everything. "You're still trying to make yourself the victim in this story. I hid who I was because I wanted to be loved for myself. You hid who you were because you were planning to rob me. We are not the same." He stepped closer and I saw his lawyer tense, probably worried about violating some court order. "You were so naive," he said, echoing the words that had started everything. "You actually believed in love." "You were right about one thing," I said, my voice steady as granite. "I was naive. But naivety can be cured with experience. What you have, the selfishness, the cruelty, the complete inability to value anything beyond yourself, that's terminal." His face flushed red, but before he could respond, his lawyer grabbed his arm and forcibly walked him away. I watched them go, feeling nothing but a vague sense of closure. Chase would spend the next 5 years in federal prison, then emerge to find an industry that had moved on without him, where his name was synonymous with scandal rather than success. That evening, I sat in my father's study as sunset painted the ocean in shades of amber and gold. In my hands was the letter he'd left with the estate documents, one I'd read 100 times but only now truly understood. "My dearest Brooke," it began in his precise handwriting. "If you're reading this, then you've finally claimed your inheritance. Not the money, that's just numbers in accounts, but the responsibility that comes with it. I kept this from you not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted you to discover who you were without its weight. True wealth isn't what you inherit, it's what you become when tested. The money can be lost, stolen, or squandered. But the person you become through trial and triumph, that's yours forever. I believe you'll become someone remarkable. Love always, Dad." The letter trembled slightly in my hands as tears I hadn't expected blurred the words. Through the window, the ocean stretched endlessly, and somewhere beyond the horizon the future waited. Not the future I'd planned with Chase, built on lies and hidden identities, but something real and solid and entirely my own. Tomorrow, the research team would present their latest findings. Next week, we'd announce 3 new partnerships with companies that shared our values. Next month, the first patients would receive the gene therapy that might save their lives. The empire I'd inherited had become something greater than my father had imagined, not just profitable but purposeful. Some women inherited fortunes and spent them. Others inherited fortunes and hid them. I'd done both and learned that neither brought happiness. True satisfaction came from using that fortune to build something meaningful, surrounded by people who valued loyalty over pedigree and truth over appearance. If this story of calculated revenge kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Brooke revealed her identity as the Hawthorne heir at the launch event. Watching Chase's face drain of color as he realized his naive wife had been funding his dreams all along. What was your favorite moment of sweet justice? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.